To continue on here, you're encouraged to explore in the visual contrast assignment, external material to pursue visual contrast. So, for example, um, here in Adobe Illustrator, I'm just going to kind of quickly place a few images. This is a digital image of New York Times cover, as well as an image of high-resolution image of water texture. I'm just going to go ahead and place both of these in Illustrator, and to place any type of digital image. This is actually rather large image here, and I think it's just important to, when you're working with images in any program, you want to be sure that you're able to control the resolution. So if you're capturing your images via a digital camera, you want to make sure that you're setting your mode settings to best resolution, for example, and when you're scanning things into the computer, you want to be sure to set the resolution at 300 dpi, preferably. And when you are placing textures, within the context of our project, the 8 by 8 inches, you want to be sure that not only is the resolution at a high level, but also what you match it to. Let's say, for example, if I want to mask the letter form with the texture, which we'll talk about in a moment, you want to make sure that you're working at a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that the scale of the letter form, in this case the letter S, and the texture are of equal size and proportion. So you want to avoid having to scale up, especially, which will take away from the integrity of the resolution and the quality, and you want to avoid scaling up or down too often within, especially when you place images into the Illustrator environment. So I just to kind of quickly go over this. If I select File, Place in my menu, and then I go out here onto my desktop here, I can find my digital image and just simply place it right into the program. And you can see that I'm actually scaling it up or down a little bit. I know that this image is of high resolution, and you want to be careful because oftentimes when you look at images on the screen, they may look crisp and clean, but when you print them out to a laser printer or inkjet printer, they may look pixelated. So it's really important to print your work out. Make sure that it's of good quality, because ultimately the litmus test, the acid test, if you will ultimately be the print quality. And so that the printer that you're exporting to will ultimately be the most important representation of the overall craft of your work. So you want to make sure that you manage that as best as you can. So we've been working from the previous exercise with the sans serif and serif letter form. What I'd like to do here is I'd like to to kind of map, if you will, the these two forms together, and you can do that with really any shape or any form within Illustrator. The only thing with typography, you want to make sure that you create outlines for the type. That way it behaves similarly to a to a shape that you create in the program so that it's easy to be able to mask these things. Also, let's say, for example, I would really kind of encourage you to move away from the digital environment and try different methods for experimentation with the visual contrast. So, for example, I mentioned the photocopy machine, for example, maybe find found objects out in the environment that can be scanned into the computer. I'm just, for the sake of ease here, I'm using existing textures that are already digitally exist within the computer, so it's just a little bit easier for me to work with as well. This image of the water texture it already existed on the computer in digital format, and then this page here was actually scanned in to the computer by a flatbed scanner. So here with the pen tool, I'm just going to go ahead and create a. You'll notice it's doing this kind of funky thing on the page because I have my fill attribute applying to this. So I'm just going to shut off the fill attribute and just make sure that it's a stroke attribute. And I'm going to go ahead and create my shape, and I'm going to close the shape, and then this shape can obviously be moved around here. So I have this shape here, and then I can scale that down a little bit. So I have this shape here, and I also have my letter. So I'm going to just introduce my letter into my onto my page, and then up under the menu I'm going to select Create Outlines. Okay, so I have one letter form that's now a vector, and I also have a vector shape that's a closed path that I've created. Both have currently a stroke attribute, and I can easily turn off or turn on that attribute. What I want to do is I want to map this. What I'll do here is I'd like to map the letter S onto the New York Times here. So there's two things that you need to do. First off, I'm going to just make a copy of my S, and I'm just going to place it right on top of the masthead, or the front page of the New York Times. And I want to just kind of select the letter form and just turn it off so that the letter form exists, but it doesn't have any paint attribute that's applied to it. Then I'm going to, so I want to both select the letter form and the placed image simultaneously. You'll notice that when you select any image that's been placed into the program, there's a sort of like an X, a letter X that runs through the image. So you know that when you click on it, the letter X appears over the image as well as the white bounding boxes around the perimeter of the image. So I want to select both images, both the S and the newspaper together, and then up under the object menu I want to select clipping mask and then make. Okay, and you'll see what that does is it actually clips the letter form and the newspaper together. So I'm just going to go ahead and move that onto my composition, and then I'm going to do the same thing for my texture, my water texture here. I'm going to take my shape, I'm going to make a copy of it, I'm going to place it on top of my water texture, I'm going to turn off my stroke attribute, and then I'm going to hold on the Shift key to select both the image and my vector, my closed vector shape, and then up under the object menu I'm going to select clipping mask make. Okay, and that kind of masks that shape to the path. And I'm going to bring that into my composition. So now I have an interesting textures that have been mapped to both the typography as well as the closed vector shape that I created with the pen tool. So you can kind of quickly see that you can begin to start to get some really interesting things that begin to start to happen here on the page. So it's a little bit hard to see, obviously, because it's on a white background. But let's say, for example, if I added maybe sort of like some color to the, to the background, for example. While we're still working in black and white at the moment, just by adding a little bit of contrast, whether it be color or black, it begins to kind of add some interesting contrast, the foreground from the background and the elements that are kind of juxtaposed within this composition. So that's kind of a quick overview of mapping texture to a closed path created in Illustrator, as well as to a letter form. And you're really kind of encouraged to explore and to experiment with creating your visual contrasts. Thank you very much. That ends this lesson.